but it doesn't take any responsibility off of you. Every one of you have a responsibility to carry this ball. We were putting too much confidence in Ron Paul. We were saying that he could get rid of the IRS, and he could have. If he had been elected President of the United States, it would have probably taken him about 30 minutes to, after he got into the Oval Office that day of the inauguration, he could have gotten rid of the IRS that quick, because he could have pardoned everybody that's in prison on IRS charges. They could have all been pardoned that day. As president, he would have had the authority to appoint the new U.S. attorneys, or the Attorney General. And the Attorney General would have had strict instructions to stop all criminal prosecutions of citizens in this country of IRS charges. The IRS is a psycho-terrorist organization. It's a terrorist, psycho-terrorist agency of the Federal Reserve Bank. It isn't even a government agency. And here we are. We have given our power. We've given our consent to this nonsense that they've been perpetrating against us, because we didn't have enough smarts to know that our heads had been tampered with, that our brains had been tampered with to the point where we're mentally disabled. You may not think you've been mentally disabled, but I'm speaking from experience, because I know that I at one point was mentally disabled. I came out of the service in 1952. I came out very disillusioned about our government. And I went back to Montana, and I tried to work in the political system. I tried to be a good American. But the only thing that I had to go by was what they had taught me in government classes in high school. And it took me at least 20 years to recognize that I had been deceived. I had been deceived into thinking that we had a democracy which takes a mob to make things happen. I was never taught about the power of an individual. I never had anybody impress me with the power of an individual. I was not a public speaker. I didn't go to school to learn to be a public speaker. But when you have it here, and when you have it here, that's all you need. And I don't think there's anybody here today hearing me that doesn't know that they need to get themselves reprogrammed, deprogrammed, and then reprogrammed with the truth. And truth is so powerful. It is so powerful, it can have such a tremendous effect on the individual. When you're powerful, you don't mind getting up and speaking to people, because you want to pass that on to others. How did we get rid of prohibition in this country? I'm not a boozer. I don't drink that stuff. I've seen too many people make fools of themselves with that. But it was bad law, because it caused every sheriff's office in this country to become corrupted. And it was the people who finally said no more guilty verdicts for when the government, the Justice Department tried to prosecute somebody for bootlegging. The juries were saying not guilty. And they had people send a message to Congress, get rid of it. And that's what they did. How did they get rid of the fugitive slave law in this country back in the middle of the 1800s? It was juries that got rid of it. They recognized that it was bad law, and they refused to convict anybody of violating this fugitive slave law. We have the precedent. The precedents are there, and we need to use them. I'm going to shift gears a little bit here, because I think that what we now have is the information that we need to take care of our judges, put our judges into their proper positions, take the power away from the judges. These guys have been treasonous. It's been treason on the part of the judges, because I can assure you there's a lot of them that know. They know that they're exercising authority and power that is not constitutional. It wasn't allowed to, it wasn't given to them, but they know they can manipulate the juries, the programmed individual. They can manipulate them. In Montana, we ran some pretty powerful television specials that we produced. In 1979, we produced a program called People and Taxes. And in 1980, we produced another one. And in 1979, the U.S. Attorney's Office and the IRS, they issued a news release. And they were very concerned about what we were doing. And they issued this news release, and it was in the papers, it was on the television and everything. And they were telling how that they had won 12 of 13 criminal IRS prosecutions in the previous 2 years. 11 out of 12. The one that they didn't win then was one on a technicality. And so they went back and indicted the fellow again and got a conviction the second time, so they were batting 100%. In 1980, they prosecuted 5 cases, and they lost 4 of them, because we had been able to communicate through the television programming with the people in the state of Montana. The one case was so significant because they had set up this farmer. He was a very successful farmer, but he was not very smart as a tax protester or a tax evader. They had him set up like a pigeon at a pigeon shoot. He was set up. They had that case so thoroughly planned and programmed that they knew they had to get a conviction. They couldn't afford to have a loss because of what we were doing with our programming and the speaking that I was doing across the state of Montana. That went to the jury. I was not able to get there, but I was keeping track by phone of what was happening. The jury took the case about 3 o'clock or so of an afternoon. They didn't come out in 30 minutes with a guilty verdict. They didn't come out in an hour. They hadn't come out when it was time to quit for the day. I don't remember what time it was that they told the jury that they could go home and come back the next day. They came back the next day and they deliberated all day long. I knew we must have somebody on that jury that had retrieved their power. They had retrieved their power from the government, the federal judge, and the federal prosecutor and the IRS. I knew that. About 5 o'clock, I got the phone call. Not guilty on all counts. I'll tell you, you don't know what being emotional is until you're involved in something like this. These were felony counts. They were going to send him up to the big house.